what is the hikmah? What is the wisdom behind this great act of worship? The wisdom, my dear brother, my dear sister, behind this act of worship is that Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal wishes for us to remain dedicated and resolute for His worship for this period of time, disconnected from the world, from the distractions of the world, from the distractions of our day-to-day life, out of our schedule, away from our friends, away from everything that can get us occupied with anything but the worship of Allah. Because, you see, for the heart to be cleansed, one has to place focus on that heart. Even sometimes just understanding ideas and opening into an idea itself. A person has to give his entire focus in order for them to simply understand something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated. Now we're talking about information here. So if that is understanding, how would you then think about something that is a spiritual opening? Spiritual opening, spirituality is the greatest state that a person can be in, even beyond the apparent acts of worship. That's why the Messenger ﷺ told us of Islam, then he told us of Iman, Islam being all the physical acts of worship, Iman being our internal belief, and then he told us of Ihsan, and that was the greatest state that a person could be in, right? So if to understand just legislations, a person has to use as much mental energy as possible, and it requires, a strong resolve, then how would you compare that to something which is an even greater state, and that is a state of purity and spiritual purity. And for that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to take time off of everything during this particular season. And this Itikaf is a practice that was done by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam throughout what? It was done by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam throughout his life since he traveled to Medina. And that's why Az-Zuhri says that عَجَبًا لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ, how shocking is the affair of the believers, of the Muslimin. Az-Zuhri being Ibn Shihab Az-Zuhri, the famous scholar of Islam. He said, تَرَكُوا الْإِعْتِكَافِ, they have left doing i'tikaf, they have left remaining within the masjids. Even though the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't leave i'tikaf since the day he came to Medina. And he continued to make it again and again and again until Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took his soul. So he was making i'tikaf sallallahu alaihi wasallam till Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal took his soul. All the time in Medina, all the years in Medina, the Prophet ﷺ is spending a portion of that in the masjid away from all distractions, right? And you can notice that he really wants to be away from distractions to a degree that in one of the years, some of the wives of the Messenger ﷺ gathered and they started to make i'tikaf as well, okay? And we'll talk about women making i'tikaf sooner than later as well, inshallah. But some of the wives, they gathered and they started making i'tikaf as well. A number of them, Zainab, and a couple of other of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they wanted to make i'tikaf when they saw the Prophet making it. So they took their little tents and they placed them in the back of the masjid. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he turned around after Fajr, he saw the tents and then he went to them, he said, Al-bir turidin, is it piety that you're looking for, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ took his own tent and put it back in the house and went and left home. Some of the scholars, they said the reason for this was because the Messenger ﷺ didn't want distractions. So if his wives are in the masjid, he might be distracted, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he ended up making up for his habit in Shawwal instead. So he made i'tikaf then in the first 10 days of Shawwal, even though the first day of Shawwal is what? Eid, right? But even then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he let them be and then he went and he made his i'tikaf in Shawwal instead of Ramadan, that specific year. So you can see that the purpose then is to be as far away from anything that will distract you. Unplug yourself from. And oftentimes I'm saying this because it becomes for a lot of us, i'tikaf, people that do i'tikaf, it becomes a social practice, right? You sort of get together with your friends, you tell them, oh, where are you making Itikaf? If you are making Itikaf in that masjid, this masjid. So a group of people get together so they're not lonely. But the purpose is to actually become lonely. So that you're away from all of the distractions, all of your friends, all of your social gatherings. And the Prophet, in this example, even staying away from his wives, right? For the purpose of then making Itikaf.